The ancient Vel'karian military installation was a monument to a civilization that had been navigating the stars when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Commander Ethan Voss stood in the observation area, watching Vel'karian technicians work to reactivate systems that had been dormant for 3,000 years. "You understand the risks?" Queen Sareth Vel'kar asked, standing beside him. She was 7 feet of scaled elegance, her bioluminescent patterns marking her as royal bloodline, her long ears adorned with the crown of stars that signified her position. "I understand that reactivating technology this old is always a gamble," Ethan said. "That's why my team is here, to provide backup assessment and emergency response if your systems fail. If not when. I appreciate your optimism, Commander." Ethan had been working with the Vel'karian Empire for 8 months, leading a small human military advisory team in a joint operation to secure their borders against a mutual threat. The Vel'karians were brilliant, proud, and bound by cultural traditions that sometimes baffled him. But they were good allies, and Queen Sareth had proven to be both strategically brilliant and surprisingly willing to get her hands dirty. Case in point, she'd insisted on personally overseeing this operation despite her general's objections. The installation contained defense systems they needed operational, but the technology was ancient and potentially unstable. The power surge happened without warning. One moment, the technicians were running standard activation sequences. The next, lights flickered across the entire facility, alarms shrieked, and something deep in the structure's core activated with a sound like thunder. "Report," Queen Sareth commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Defense protocols activating. Ancient systems coming online. They're not responding to shutdown commands." The floor shook. A section of the installation's central chamber, where the Queen had been standing moments before she'd moved to the observation area, suddenly sealed itself with massive doors that slammed shut with terrifying finality. Except the Queen wasn't in the observation area anymore. Ethan's heart dropped as he realized what he'd missed in the chaos. The Queen had moved back toward the central chamber when the alarms started, trying to reach her lead technician. She was on the wrong side of the sealed doors when they'd closed. "Your Majesty," one of the Vel'karian guards was already moving, but the floor between them and the sealed chamber buckled. Structural supports gave way with screaming metal. Ancient technology, not designed for modern stress, was failing catastrophically. Through the observation window, Ethan could see the Queen trapped in the central chamber, separated from them by the sealed blast doors and growing structural collapse. The Vel'karian warriors immediately began organizing rescue, cutting tools, emergency protocols, coordinated response. They were moving efficiently until Elder Kareth arrived. The elderly Vel'karian moved with the authority of someone whose spiritual position superseded even military rank. "Stop! All of you, stop!" The warriors froze, clearly torn. "Elder, the Queen is trapped. The Sanctum of Ascension has been activated." Kareth's voice carried absolute certainty. "Look at the seals, the biorecognition patterns, the containment field responding to royal blood signature." Ethan looked at his scanner readouts. The ancient system had indeed activated in response to Queen Sareth's biosignature, her royal bloodline triggering protocols that were thousands of years old. "This is one of our most sacred sites," Kareth continued, addressing the assembled Vel'karians. "The Sanctum of Ascension was designed during the Succession Wars, a place where royal claimants would be sealed during contested successions. Ancient law is absolute. No Vel'karian may enter once the seal is formed. To violate it is to desecrate the sacred bond between royalty and the ancestors." "She's trapped in a collapsing structure," one of the generals protested. "Sacred law doesn't demand we let our Queen die." "Sacred law demands exactly that," Kareth said, his voice heavy with pain. "The Sanctum's purpose is to determine divine will in succession. If the Queen is meant to rule, the ancestors will preserve her. If not, If not, she dies in a collapsed chamber because ancient technology malfunctioned. Ethan's voice cut through the debate. That's your plan. Sareth turned to him. You are human. You cannot understand the sacred significance. I understand that your queen is trapped in a building that's actively falling apart. I can see the structural stress on my scanners. She has maybe 20 minutes before that entire section collapses completely. Ethan pulled up his readings, showing them to the assembled Vel'karians. Your sacred law is going to kill her. The law is the law, Sareth said firmly. Any Vel'karian who enters commits unforgivable sacrilege. They damn not just themselves but their entire bloodline. The prohibition is absolute. The Vel'karian warriors stood frozen, caught between their duty to protect their queen and their most sacred religious law. Ethan could see the agony in their expressions. They wanted to act, but the cultural and spiritual consequences were too overwhelming. What exactly does this law say? Ethan asked. The specific wording. Sareth recited from memory. No Vel'karian shall violate the Sanctum of Ascension once its seal is formed. To enter is to reject divine judgment. To interfere is to deny the ancestors' will. Such desecration carries condemnation beyond death, the staining of bloodline, the cursing of descendants, the eternal separation from our people's soul. No Vel'karian, Ethan repeated. Your law says no Vel'karian can enter. Yes, then it's good I'm not Vel'karian. Ethan started moving toward the sealed entrance before anyone could process what he'd said. Commander, wait, General Vexter moved to intercept him. The ancient defenses they'll activate against any intrusion. You'll be killed. Maybe, but I'm definitely not bound by your sacred law. And your queen is definitely dying if someone doesn't do something. Ethan checked his equipment, cutting torch, structural supports, emergency medical supplies. How do I bypass the seal? You can't. How do I bypass the seal? He said it more firmly. The Vel'karian warriors exchanged glances. Finally, one of the technicians spoke. The biolock responds to royal Vel'karian DNA. It won't recognize you as a valid entity to seal against. If you can cut through the physical door. Got it. Ethan activated his plasma cutter, human technology that the ancient Vel'karian systems wouldn't know how to counter. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, the structure's probably collapsed. Don't come in after me. Your law, remember. He started cutting before anyone could argue further. The plasma cutter worked faster than Ethan expected. The ancient Vel'karian door, built to resist their technology from millennia ago, had no protocols for human cutting tools. He breached the seal in under 2 minutes and stepped through into the Sanctum of Ascension. The chamber was chaos. Structural supports had collapsed. Ancient defense systems flickered with unstable energy. And in the center, pinned under a fallen support beam, Queen Sareth was trying to free herself with one arm while the other hung at an unnatural angle. She looked up as he entered, her expression cycling through surprise and something like resignation. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice strained with pain. Your people's law doesn't prohibit you. Mine is absolute. You've condemned yourself. Your people's law says I shouldn't. My law says I can't leave someone to die when I have the ability to help. Ethan moved to the collapsed beam, scanning it with his equipment. How bad are you hurt? Broken arm, possibly fractured ribs, trapped leg. She watched him assess the situation. Commander, the defenses will activate. They were designed to kill anyone attempting to interfere with. The energy pulse hit him mid-sentence. It felt like being electrocuted and burned simultaneously. Ethan gritted his teeth through it, his human nervous system responding differently than Vel'karian biology would. It hurt like hell, but it didn't incapacitate him. That's going to keep happening, the Queen said. Noted. Ethan positioned his portable lift under the beam. On 3, I'm going to raise this enough for you to pull free. Can you move your trapped leg? I think so. Another energy pulse hit. Ethan's vision blurred, but he stayed focused. 1, 2, 3. The lift engaged with a hydraulic whine. The beam rose slowly. heavy beyond what one person should be able to move, but the human equipment was designed for exactly this kind of emergency. Queen Sareth pulled herself free just as another energy pulse hit. This one caught them both. The queen cried out, her species far more vulnerable to the ancient weapons. Ethan felt his muscles spasm but forced himself to stay upright. "We need to move, now." He helped her stand, taking most of her weight as she favored her injured leg. The structure groaned ominously. Chunks of ceiling started falling. They made it halfway to the exit when the chamber's defense system ramped up, multiple energy pulses in rapid succession. Ethan felt his skin burning, his muscles screaming, but he kept moving. The queen was barely conscious, the repeated hits devastating her Vel'karian physiology. He carried her the last 20 feet, his vision tunneling, his entire body feeling like it was on fire. The breach he'd cut through the door was just ahead. The ceiling collapsed behind them as they stumbled through. Ethan fell forward, protecting the queen's body with his own as debris rained down. The last of the sanctum's chamber caved in with a sound like the world ending. Then they were through, on the safe side of the seal, and Vel'karian warriors were surrounding them. Medical teams rushed to the queen. Ethan, his body covered in burns and his nervous system shocked beyond anything he'd experienced, was vaguely aware of being lifted, of concerned voices in multiple languages, of the shocked faces of Vel'karians who just watched a human do the impossible. The last thing he saw before passing out was Elder Karith's expression, horror and awe in equal measure. Ethan woke in a medical facility, his body wrapped in regenerative bandages that felt like they were simultaneously healing and torturing him. A Vel'karian medical officer noticed him stirring. "Commander, you're awake. The queen will want to know." "Is she alive?" Ethan's voice was rough. "Yes, injured but stable. You got her out in time." The medical officer's expression was complicated. "You saved her life." "Good." Ethan tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "How long was I out?" "2 days. Your injuries were extensive. The ancient defense systems are designed to be lethal to Vel'karians. Your human physiology responded differently, but the damage was still severe." Over the next few days, as Ethan recovered, he became aware of the political firestorm his actions had created. Vel'karian officials came and went from his medical room, some thanking him, others looking at him with something between awe and horror. Finally, he was summoned before the Vel'karian High Council. The chamber was intimidating by design, circular, with the council members seated in elevated positions around a central platform where Ethan stood. Queen Sareth sat at the highest point, her arm in a regenerative cast, but otherwise appearing recovered. Elder Karith spoke first. "Commander Ethan Voss, you stand before this council to answer for actions taken at the ancient installation of Vel'mar. Do you understand the nature of what you did?" "I entered your sacred site to rescue your queen from a collapsing structure. Yeah, I understand what I did. You violated the Sanctum of Ascension, one of our holiest sites, protected by laws written 3,000 years ago and maintained without exception since." Karith's voice was grave. "You have committed sacrilege. I saved your queen's life." "Both things are true," the elder acknowledged. "And that is the problem." Another council member spoke, a conservative faction leader whose scales bore marks of ancient lineage. "The law is clear. The sanctum cannot be violated. Any who enter commit unforgivable desecration. The sanctity of this law supersedes even royal life. That is its entire purpose, to ensure succession happens according to divine will without interference." "Divine will that would have crushed your queen under a collapsed ceiling." Ethan kept his voice level. "Or is it possible that your ancient law, written for succession disputes, doesn't perfectly apply to accidental activation during a technical malfunction?" "The law makes no such distinction." "Then your law is flawed." Ethan said it flatly. Several council members looked shocked that he'd speak so directly. "I'm sorry if that's offensive, but I watched your warriors stand paralyzed, while your queen was dying because a law written thousands of years ago for different circumstances prohibited them from acting. That's not sacred, that's just rigid. Queen Sareth spoke for the first time. Commander Voss, did you understand when you entered that you were violating our most sacred law? I understood you told me I couldn't enter. I also understood you were dying. The choice seemed pretty straightforward. You risked your life for someone of another species, knowing you'd face consequences. I risked my life to save someone who needed saving. The species part didn't really factor in. He met her eyes. Neither did the consequences, not in that moment. The Queen turned to the council. We have an impossible situation. Commander Voss violated sacred law, that's undeniable. He also saved royal life, equally undeniable. Our laws say the former demands punishment. Our honor says the latter demands reward. These two truths are in direct conflict. Elder Kareth spoke gravely. Your Majesty, with respect, this is precisely why the law is absolute. If we allow exceptions, we undermine the entire foundation. We're not allowing an exception, we're acknowledging reality. The Queen stood, despite her injuries. I propose this council recognize both truths simultaneously. Commander Voss will face the traditional consequence for violating the sanctum, permanent exile from all Vel'karian sacred sites, and exclusion from religious ceremonies. This satisfies the law's demand for accountability. She looked at Ethan. But he will also receive our highest honor for saving royal life, formal recognition as protector of the crown, with all attendant rights, responsibilities, and honors. This satisfies our debt in our honor. The council erupted in debate. The compromise satisfied no one completely, but most grudgingly. After hours of argument, they voted. Ethan would be simultaneously exiled from sacred spaces and honored as the Queen's protector. A paradox that perfectly reflected the impossible situation he'd walked into. Months after the incident, Ethan found himself in a strange position. He was simultaneously one of the most honored humans in Vel'karian space and permanently banned from their most sacred cultural sites. Conservative Vel'karians viewed him with suspicion or disdain. Progressive factions treated him as a hero who'd exposed the rigidity of ancient laws. The Queen's own position had become complicated, defended by a human who'd committed sacrilege to save her. They met privately in the palace gardens, away from the constant political scrutiny. You understand you're now permanently banned from our most sacred sites, Queen Sareth said without preamble. I've been banned from places before, Ethan said. Usually for good reasons. This one was worth it. Do you ever regret it? The complications you faced, being simultaneously honored and condemned by my people. No, he said it without hesitation. You're alive, that matters more than any of the rest. The Queen was quiet for a moment. Her bioluminescent patterns shifting to colors Ethan had learned meant deep thought. My own people would have let me die to preserve tradition, she said finally. You, a human who barely understands our culture, saved me without hesitation. That's humbling and troubling. Why troubling? Because it suggests we've become too bound by our traditions, that our strength has become rigidity, that we've lost the ability to adapt when situations don't fit our ancient frameworks. She looked at him directly. You weren't constrained by our laws, so you could do what needed to be done. What does it say about us that it took an outsider to save our own queen? The question had been spreading through Vel'karian society. The incident had become a catalyst for examination of their relationship to ancient laws, not abandoning tradition, but questioning whether blind adherence served them or limited them. I've been thinking about that, Ethan admitted. Your laws exist for reasons. The sanctum prohibition was designed to prevent political interference in succession, to keep powerful families from manipulating outcomes. That's a legitimate concern. But technology failed. The situation wasn't political, it was mechanical. Your law couldn't distinguish between legitimate succession determination and accidental activation. so it would have let you die to preserve a principle that didn't even apply. That's what Elder Karith can't accept, that the law might have limits, that ancient wisdom might not cover all modern circumstances. Over the following year, the tension between tradition and adaptation continued playing out in Vel'karian society. Queen Sareth became more willing to question traditional constraints when they conflicted with practical necessity. She credited Ethan's example, not his specific action, but his approach of evaluating situations based on circumstances rather than predetermined rules. A year after the incident, during a formal ceremony marking the anniversary, Queen Sareth addressed her people. "A year ago, I was trapped by our own ancestors' technology, bound by laws they wrote for circumstances that no longer exist. My people could not save me, not from lack of courage but from sacred prohibition. A human, bound by no such law, stepped forward and acted." She gestured to Ethan, standing in his position as protector of the crown, honored but also forever marked as one who'd violated their most sacred space. "We condemned him for sacrilege. We honored him as savior. Both were necessary, both were appropriate. The paradox reflects the truth that Commander Voss did something simultaneously forbidden and essential. His action forced us to ask uncomfortable questions, questions about tradition versus necessity, about sacred law versus practical reality. These questions have no easy answers, but they were questions we needed to ask. The Queen's speech didn't resolve all tensions. Conservative factions remained uncomfortable with any questioning of sacred law. Progressive factions wanted more aggressive reform. But it began a conversation, a gradual shift toward examining traditions rather than just accepting them. For Ethan, the situation remained complex. Some Vel'karians treated him with deep respect, others with suspicion. He'd accepted it with the same pragmatism he'd shown that day in the collapsing sanctum. It was what it was, and he'd make the same choice again. When a human journalist asked about his relationship with the Vel'karian Empire, he said, "I saved someone's life. That it was their queen made it politically complicated. That it violated their sacred law made it culturally complicated. But the actual choice was simple. Someone needed help. I could provide it, so I did. Everything else is consequences I'll deal with." And the Queen, when asked about the human who'd saved her at the cost of being condemned by her people's faith, responded, "Commander Voss showed me that courage sometimes means acting despite consequences, not calculating them. That loyalty can come from unexpected places. That someone who barely knows you can demonstrate more genuine care than those bound to you by law or tradition." She paused, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to the colors that indicated profound emotion. "He also showed me that my people, for all our strength and pride, had become so constrained by our own laws that we would have let our queen die rather than violate tradition. That's a truth we're still processing, but it's a truth we needed to face." The bond between them endured, complicated, politically fraught, but genuine. Built not on tradition or protocol, but on a moment when someone stepped forward to do what needed to be done, regardless of consequences.